All right, welcome back, everybody. It's time to continue with Michelangelo as a painter. Another one of our, typical Renaissance men, give them a task and they may protest a little bit, but then they achieve masterpiece status with the result. And that's true when Michelangelo was pulled in a few decades later to the Sistine Chapel and to complete one large-scale fresco mural. Let me show you what I'm talking about. All right, moving to the PowerPoint here, let's take a look at where we left off. And of course, we're seeing, this might be Pope Francis actually, inside the Sistine Chapel. We've already met the program of frescoes on the ceiling that he accomplished in the early 16th century. And then moving forward here, and you can just make out the project I'm going to talk about next. The back altar wall of the Sistine Chapel is where we're heading next. And there it has one theme or subject, and that is the Last Judgment. And that is the title as well. Again, looking at the altar wall of the Sistine Chapel. As you can see by the dates, we have moved forward in time a good 3 to 4 decades later, 1536 to 1541. Looking at this large-scale mural, we find it quite large. It's 48 by 44 feet. Again, the medium is fresco. Surprisingly, that Michelangelo was agreeable to come back to a place that he spent so many years painting that ceiling. You'd think he'd be sick of the project by now. But what's interesting is we get to sort of see his more mature style. At this point, some 25, 30 years later, we get to see how the artist rendered the human figure, for instance, which is quite a bit different than how he portrayed the human body, even on the Sistine Chapel or in his earlier sculpture that we've already discussed, like the Pietà or the David statue. All right. Well, first of all, the idea comes, this is a very popular theme in associated in art history, particularly in medieval times. This was that was an era where really people had great anxiety and fear that if they were too sinful in their lives, that they would not be part of those chosen to go to heaven. There is a belief that Jesus will come back at some point to execute a last judgment of everyone's souls, whether you're going to rise up and join him in heaven or end up down in the fiery pits of hell here. So let me get my face to disappear here. I'm blocking part of the mural, and then you can take a look at what I'm talking about. Instead of organized in individual scenes like we saw in the Sistine Chapel, what you can see here is one complete complex composition filled with many, many figures. Where is Jesus? I've been mentioning him, right? Well, if you look at the top center of the composition, you can find him with kind of a almost like a heavenly glow behind his body. Mary is beneath his right arm. And then there are these kind of billowy clouds and sort of depicting the heavenly realm in this particular scene. What's happening below here is the souls are rising from their graves. And those are the people who have been admitted, that have been past, Jesus's discerning judgment, and are rising up to heaven as part of the chosen. So they are slowly ascending on the left-hand side of the composition. Meanwhile, on the right-hand side of the composition, there is a downward momentum that you see particularly in this region. And that's where Jesus is looking, by the way, with his arm raised, and I'll show you a detailed shot of that. That is a gesture of damnation. This is not, the gentle, depictions of Jesus that we've seen, or, him kind of helpless as a crucified martyr, or passively being grieved over in those scenes of lamentation or pietà that we've been looking at in art history. This is a totally different Jesus. I'm going to show you a close-up of that in just a minute, but that gesture of damnation, that glance to this side of the painting, this is where the sinners are on a fast track to hell. All right. Speaking of those detail shots, let's pull in a little bit more to see what I'm talking about here. Here is Jesus, there is Mary. Let me see here. There we go. This is what I'm talking about. Michelangelo's more mature style. What you find is he is depicting Jesus less like that kind of lanky physique that we met when he was a young sculptor in his 20s, when he executed the Pietà statue. And of course, when we looked at Michelangelo's statue of David, how much it really reflected his humanist studies of Greek heroes and statues of gods, with its very kind of athletic physique. What we see here in the back altar wall of the Sistine Chapel is an approach to anatomy where you still see tremendous musculature, right? Look at Jesus, look at some of the saints and other figures standing nearby, but it's a broader, kind of beefier body type. It's almost like the kind of body type you find recruited into football or wrestling, that kind of thing. It is a different kind of physicality you find a part of Michelangelo's mature style as he's evolved as an artist. And there's that gesture of damnation here. Also included around him are saints who've been through excruciatingly kind of horrific martyrdoms, right? Included here is Saint Bartholomew. Saint Bartholomew was a saint who was skinned alive, so he is carrying his own hide as a clue for the viewer. It's called an attribute. It's a little something sometimes these saints hold that give you a little indication on who they are supposed to represent. Some say that that is a self-portrait of Michelangelo, the artist, by the way. I'll leave it to you psychology students to figure that out. The other detail shot I have for you here is the very entertaining depiction of the sinners and the cackling demons pulling them down to hell. So look at this guy's face here. It's almost like this, oh no, I blew it. But it's too late as you see these Michelangelo's very fertile imagination creating these horrible, part human, part demon monsters, right, with horns. I love this guy rendered in foreshortening with his head thrown upside down, staring at us, the viewer, in a menacing way, pulling, again, the poor sinner down to hell. Moving on here, at the bottom right-hand corner of the large mural of the Last Judgment scene, this is the destination, of course, for sinners. As again the fire rages in this hellscape, they disembark from this barge that's going to take them into forever a tormented purgatory-like existence run by all kinds of these horrible gargoyle-looking faces to await their eternal punishment. Oh no. Pulling back, of course, what I also want you to notice, this is going to impact our later Baroque artists. Not only do we have this very kind of powerful, broad physique for men and women in the Last Judgment painting here, but look how dynamic and animated the physiques are, right? There's lots of variety of poses, you know, twisted body poses, extended arms. It communicates a lot of energy. So together, compositionally, if I can pull back to the whole scene here, you know, he's been able to communicate a very complex theme. He's been able to wrangle compositionally a lot of figures in a unified large-scale format. And again, they're kind of with Jesus as kind of the linchpin in the middle, in this very interesting opposing forces. And I'm not talking about visual tension, but this idea again of one side of the painting have this movement upward and the other side of the painting kind of communicating a descent downward. So there you have it, Michelangelo's mature painting style, a different kind of physicality described in his signature muscular figures, but a message that reminds the viewer, again, what's coming someday is Judgment Day. So if you are worried about your, you know, eternal soul and damnation, you better toe the line and pay attention to some of the doctrines preached at the Vatican. All right, that's it. Talk to you soon.